the Glen Armintor Law Corporation.
Tonight on Blue Mondays. Saturday is Election Day, so we give you a preview on how to use the new ballot boxes. Then we have a sit-down interview with Mike Stagg and a closer look at LCRM, or Louisiana Committee for a Republican Majority. All this and more tonight on Blue Monday. Tune in Saturday night, Election Day, from 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. on AOC Channel 16 for live election coverage. This will be the only live election coverage here in Acadiana, being brought to you by the local Democratic and the Republican parties. Join us Saturday from 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. live on AOC Channel 16.
When the voter enters the booth, they will see lights where they are voting. On each race they will vote on, there will be a light. You press the selection you desire and look down, and you will see the candidate you've chosen. You go to the next race that's lit up. You select this candidate. You'll be shown the candidate you voted for. Go to the next race. You'll be shown the candidate you voted for, and you must go to the right bottom of the machine and press the Cast Vote button for your vote to count. And after you do that, it shows you vote is recorded and thanks you for voting. To demonstrate, if you vote for John Adams, as is marked here, it shows you voted for John Adams, and you've decided that that's not the person you want to vote to. You simply deselect John Adams. It'll show you that that's canceled, and you vote for the person you want to vote for.
Well, the LCRM is the Louisiana Committee for a Republican Majority. And in the spring of this year, in March of this year, there was a special election in New Orleans to fill the unexpired term of a state representative in District 94, House District 94, and a friend of mine was running for that seat, Deborah Langhoff. And I was a volunteer in her campaign and went to New Orleans the night of the election for the election party, and she showed me these direct mail pieces that had gone out that literally tried to put other people's words in her mouth. And physically had words typed over her mouth that she had never uttered, but made it appear that she had. And it was just really deceptive stuff. And several thousand pieces of these hit a couple of days before the election, paid for by Louisiana Committee for a Republican Majority. So that got me curious. And so I started doing some research. I remember when the organization was formed, but I hadn't really paid that much attention to them. So I went and started looking at their campaign finance records and some newspaper articles. And they were started by Senator David Vitter and his wife Wendy in late 2005. When the rest of us in South Louisiana, either in southeast or southwest Louisiana, were digging out from the hurricanes Katrina and Rita, these people were plotting of how they could take control of the Louisiana legislature. And so Senator Vitter and his wife invited a few of their well-heeled friends who contributed to their campaigns, people like Joe Canizera, Boise Bollinger, other people like that, well-known Republican, deep-pocketed friends, closely tied to the Bush administration, invited them to a meeting where they laid out their strategy to basically create a PAC, model after Tom DeLay's organization in Texas, the Texans for a Republican Majority, which by this time had already been indicted in Texas for campaign finance laws, for money laundering. Members of that organization had been convicted in court. Tom DeLay had been the majority leader of the House of Representatives, had been forced to resign his position in September of that year, of 2005, and still they decided to model what they were going to try in Louisiana after what is essentially a criminal enterprise, the Texans for Republican Majority. And that to me said something. I mean, if you're going to model your behavior on something, what you model it after says something about your intent. And that said to me that something was up. And so that got me even more curious. And so I then proceeded to look into the activities of this organization more. And what became clear is they were intending to raise a large sum of money Their stated goal when they began was $2.5 million, I later learned. And, they've made great progress towards that. They haven't quite reached there. They had a little setback this summer with Senator Vitter's scandal. But one of the key early supporters of this operation was a Houston home builder by the name of Bob Perry. Bob Perry first burst on the national scene as a funder of people who swift-boated John Kerry's presidential campaign, questioning his war record so that we could elect a draft dodger and a guy who evaded his service in the National Guard, president and vice president. So Bob Perry had given about $4 million to that. Turns out that Bob Perry has given about $25 million to political campaigns in the 2004-2006 cycle. But what's interesting about where he gives his money is that much of it goes into these attack campaigns. At the federal level, they're called 527s. And there's a home builder site, a homeowner's website in Texas that has tracked Perry's political involvement. And in the 2006 cycle, he was very active. But what was apparent is that it dawned on people after those elections that the message that these organizations he backed were sending out were inaccurate. They were lies, basically. And so if you're going to recruit Bob Perry to your venture, you have an expectation and he has an expectation. His expectation is that you will do whatever it takes to win and that the truth is irrelevant. And so they got $100,000 from Bob Perry in November 2006. They got $100,000 on the same day, or at least pocketed it on the same day, from a company in southeast Louisiana that is a LLC of Edison Schwess Corporation. And so $200,000 in a day. And I don't know about you or me, but $100,000 is a lot of money. And if you can raise that in a pop, and they were raising $400,000 every election cycle in their fundraising event, and basically it looked like they were a group of about 25 people who had committed $100,000 each, which would give you the $2.5 million. And so then as you look through the election reports, the campaign finance reports, you start seeing that Joe Canizera, Boise Bollinger, a member of Canizera's bank board, some other people, Michael Polito from Baton Rouge, John Georges before he quit the Republican Party. These people were on a schedule. Phyllis Taylor, Taylor Energy, these were on a schedule, giving $25,000 every 6 months to the LCRM. They did that, religiously until this summer. So they were all in for $75,000. We have documentation to prove all this. We have identities of these people who've done this. And they were up to about $1.3 million as of June. And then Senator Vitter's scandal hit, and most of them pulled back at that point. And but they still raised $300,000 in the reporting cycle between June and September. More of that money was from out of state. About 70% of that money was from out of state in the last cycle, as they sort of reveal their hand a little more, that this is really the state franchise. This is the Louisiana franchise of a national Republican venture to create what Karl Rove used to brag about being the permanent Republican majority. That's what this is. And what I saw when you connect the dots between the kind of campaigns that Bob Perry's been involved in and what I saw them do to my friend in New Orleans with their name on the document, what they're going to do in this election cycle is they're going to spend their money available, $700,000 on hand as of the September report. They're going to take that money and they're going to use it to attack. They're not endorsing candidates to the extent that they could, because why? Well, if you're a PAC and you endorse a candidate, the most you can give is $5,000. Well, let's do the math. If they endorse a candidate in every race that they say is important to them, 38 races is what they started off with. Let's say they get greedy. Let's say 50 races. Well, that's still $250,000. That leaves them $500,000 if they never raise another penny sitting on the table. They don't intend to leave any money on the table. They're going to spend that money. They're going to be in attack mode. And in 1991, Buddy Roemer ran for re-election, and I don't think Buddy Roemer was a good governor, but he was an honest guy anyway, but he had his Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency shut down a hazardous waste burning operation in Amelia called marine shale processing. I mean, you have to be pretty bad for Louisiana's DEQ and EPA to shut you down. Well, this was a horrible operation, but the owner of that operation decided, a man by the name of Jack Kent, decided to launch a vendetta against Buddy Roemer. And so in the 1991 election cycle, he spent $500,000 of his own money attacking Buddy Roemer. All he did was attack Buddy Roemer on television and newspaper ads. Well, the result was Roemer didn't make the runoff. And so Kent achieved his objective. But we got stuck with the runoff between Edwin Edwards and David Duke. I don't think that's the best choices we could have had. And then when Roemer ran again in 1995, Kent came back with another $300,000, and we were faced with the runoff of Mike Foster and Cleo Fields. All I'm saying is that when there is an entity in a campaign whose only focus is negative, it distorts the political process and the way that it works. And where we are in Louisiana right now, we have big issues in front of us. We have big challenges ahead of us. We need to be able to make the best choices that we can based on the best information available. And if you're going to have an organization whose sole commitment is to partisanship, in the eyes of these people, there are no good people if you're not Republican. They're going to take their money and they're going to spend it in House and Senate races, and they're going to slam Democrats. Well, it's hard to raise money in House and Senate campaigns unless you're tied to these people, because basically, you have all these statewide candidates who are out there sucking up the money first, and it's a lot more sexy to give money to a candidate for governor than it is somebody running for the House of Representatives. So if they can come in like they did in House District 94, where they did not endorse a candidate, but spent at least $6,500 on those direct mail pieces, well, then, one, they're free of the spending cap, and two, that money has a huge impact, because one, it's going to arrive late in the cycle, and two, when you have in races like that where it's hard to raise money, $6,000, $10,000 is a tremendous amount of money, particularly when it's dropped in a period where you cannot respond. And so I think that the Louisiana Committee for a Republican Majority is a cancerous force in our politics, cancerous presence in our politics, and I think it undermines the Republican claims that they are the party of ethics. Because if you look at their latest campaign finance reports, the September campaign finance reports, there are some glaring omissions. And this report is prepared by professional CPA. This is not an accident. Omission number one. They list $24,000 of in-kind contributions. They itemize $1,000 of expenditures. Now, we know from the campaign finance reports filed by individual candidates that, for instance, Lala Lalonde in our area received $1,600 in in-kind contributions from the LCRM. $1,500 of it is classified as the donation of campaign software. $100 of it is a campaign policy handbook. Some other candidates have also claimed that $100 campaign policy handbook. LCRM does not report that. There's a discrepancy there. And it has major implications, because if you're going to spend money independent of these campaigns, there can't be any coordination. But if these campaigns have accepted something of value from you already, there is a connection. And I think this raises serious questions about the LCRM's ability to operate in that way. The other error in that report was that they listed $8,500 in contributions to candidates. On their schedule, they didn't name a single candidate. So they're hiding something. And then, as I've looked at the reports in some detail over their 2 calendar years of existence, another thing stands out. Again, they're paying a company what is classified as the executive director fees for their organization. They're not paying an individual, they're paying a company. Now, there's a guy by the name of John Diaz who goes around the state and identifies himself as the executive director of the LCRM. But they pay a company that he heads to be executive director fees.
They've outsourced it.
They've essentially, but I've gone through their campaign finance reports, gone through their expenditures. They've paid his company $233,252.42 since April of 2006 in executive director fees. Now, that's more than they spent on computer services. They've spent $170,000 on computer services, including $30,000 to have campaign software written for them. And so they have spent more money on the executive director fees than anything else. They've spent, at $1.6 million, $233,000 of it is executive director fees. Well, then about a fifth of what they've spent is on executive director fees. I go back again to what is their model. Their model is Texans for Republican majority. Tom DeLay was paying his wife and his daughter consulting fees to work for Texans for Republican majority and Americans for Republican majority. They made a good living working for the family business, which was consulting. LCRM is hiding something with the money they're paying Campaign Opinion Research, which is John Diaz's company. I've never met him. I'm sure he's competent, but $233,000 in a little more than a year and a half, a year and a quarter. I mean, something's up here. And again, why does this matter? Because they insist that they're only in it for the ethics, because they want to do what's right. Well, if they want to do what's right, they would be open. And if you have professionally prepared campaign finance reports and there are these glaring errors on it, I don't think that's an accident. I think there's intentional deception involved here. And then when you something else has cropped up recently, and that is I got a call about a campaign in the New Orleans area where there was something going on. An FBI agent was used in an ad without his permission. The FBI slapped down this Republican candidate, and it had some of the telltale signs of LCRM involvement in it. And there's some involvement. The same ad agency that they do a lot of work with out of Covington is involved in some of that stuff. But then I noticed that there are some LLC contributions to this candidate that looked kind of strange, because first of all, they all came on the same day, and they were all made by the same an LLC with a little slight variation in the name. And when you go to the the Secretary of State's corporate database website and you look up these LLCs, well, they're controlled by the same people. So it looks like some people are using LLCs as a means of circumventing the campaign finance caps on contributions. And so that got me curious. So I then went back to the LCRM campaign finance report, the database now that I have in a spreadsheet, and looked at the LLCs. And there are a large number of LLCs that made contributions to the LCRM, small contributions. But the significance of those small contributions is that if you're going to be treated as a large PAC and be able to make a $5,000 contribution to a candidate, you have to have at least 250 contributors. So what they did was they went through they talked amongst themselves and said, "You've got LLCs, I've got LLCs. Why don't we have our LLCs pony up some money? Nothing major, just $50, $100, something like that. No problem." So Joe Canizera had 9 of his LLCs make contributions to the LCRM, and Michael Polito of MAP Construction in Baton Rouge had 7 of his LLCs make contributions to the LCRM. But the granddaddy of them all is Bollinger Shipyard in Boise, Bollinger, who had 19 LLCs make contributions to the LCRM. Again, Bollinger Shipyards is in for $75,000, but the rest of these are all small contributions. Well, so it then appeared that there could be a method here based on what I'd seen in that New Orleans campaign. So I started checking around, and it turns out I looked at campaigns where I knew the LCRM had been involved in some kind of way, and one of those again in this area is La Lalonde's campaign. And sure enough, there's a contribution in his campaign finance reports from Bollinger Shipyard. Oh, by the way, that same day. And the Bollinger contribution is $2,500, and that same day there's a second contribution from something called Chand LLC, also for $2,500. Well, I go to the corporate database, at Secretary of State's office, Chand LLC is controlled by Bollinger Shipyards. So Bollinger Shipyards, in effect, gave La La Lawn $5,000 that day, but they did it through two entities. And again, you see this a lot in campaigns where a husband will give money, a wife will give money, maybe even their kids. That's okay. The individual is named. There's transparency there. You know who is giving that money. What's happening with these LLCs is they are hiding the source of the money. And so another campaign in this area that I knew had received some help from the LCRM was Isabella Delahoussie's campaign. And so I checked at her campaign, and she too had received the $100 campaign booklet in-kind contribution from the LCRM. There's a $2,500 contribution from Bollinger Shipyard, and there's also that same day a $2,500 contribution from Chan. Stepping back, when La La Lawn has raised a total of $30,000, including in-kind contributions. So if you take the $5,000 that Bollinger's given him and add the $1,600 that he's gotten from reports as in-kind from the LCRM, well, $6,600 out of $30,000. That's more than a fifth of his money is really from a single source. Ms. Delahoussie raised $33,000 in actual contributions, more than that, including some loans she's taken and stuff like that. Well, still, $5,000 of that comes from a single source. And if people are allowed to use these LLCs as shields to enable, as basically shells to let them give as much money as they want to campaigns, then we don't have campaign finance laws in Louisiana
or ethics.
Right, and again, and this goes back. What is this about? This is about Republican claims that they are the party of ethics, and if this is the way they're running their campaigns, they're not ethical, right? Because what they are trying to do is buy the selection, and we have yet to see all the this is before all the negative stuff from the LCRM kicks in. The Louisiana Committee for Republican Majority, their attack stuff, this will fall. But I think we need to find an attorney, the Attorney General or District Attorney needs to demand that they reveal the sources, the names of the campaigns that they've given money to or in-kind donations to, because if they then come into those campaigns and spend money supposedly as an independent third party, yet they've had contact with those campaigns, they've had those candidates at their workshop, they are violating Louisiana campaign finance laws. It's illegal. It's certainly not ethical. And again, what is the core of their message? The core of their message is we are the party of ethics. Well, maybe not. Mike Strain, candidate for Commissioner of Agriculture, has received money from some of these LLCs. Joe Canizera's LLCs contributed $7,500 to his campaign on the same day. Again, what is as an individual, the most that Mr. Canizera could give would be $5,000, but using his LLC, he's able to make multiple contributions. I mean, this Bobby Jindal. Bobby Jindal has raised a lot of money, and some of it has come from this type of LLC shell game. And what makes it so bad about that is he doesn't need the money. He has raised plenty of money on his own, and I'm not saying that he's even aware of it. But what kind of manager is he if he's not even aware of who's giving money to his campaign? But the facts are that these are people tied to the Louisiana Committee for Republican Majority. They modeled themselves after a criminal enterprise that had no respect for the campaign finance laws in Texas. And now what we see in Louisiana, they are carrying out activities that subvert campaign finance laws in Louisiana. They subvert ethics in Louisiana, and neither that organization nor the party they are affiliated with, and they've given money to the Republican Party, nor the candidates who receive it and benefit from their actions can claim to stand as a candidate of ethics, a party of ethics, if they're going to condone this type of behavior, if they're going to accept the benefits of the activities of an organization that conducts itself in this way. And I think this is a bad time for this to be happening in Louisiana because of the challenges we face. Again, It undermines the political process. Voters need to be able to make clear-eyed judgments about who is best to serve them. And if they cannot distinguish between somebody who is telling them the truth and somebody who is deceiving them, because the person who's deceiving them is using a well-oiled process and hiding big money behind their campaign, well, then voters are not served well, and ultimately Louisiana will not be served well. Well, the other piece is that the media will not look at that stuff late in the election because they don't want to get caught in that he said, she said thing in the last. They don't want to be used by campaigns in the last minute. So this is very clever. It's sinister. I think it's sinister. It's by strategy, and they are undermining the political process. And I think that it needs to be exposed. People need to be aware of this. When anything arrives at your house in the mail from the Louisiana Committee for a Republican Majority, consider the source. What's wrong with our politics in Louisiana at the national level is that big money has shut out the voices of ordinary people. Louisiana Committee for Republican Majority represents the biggest money, the fattest cats, the smallest crowd of fattest cats in the state.